Hey everybody, it's Johnny Two Face here, back with another reaction video. This time I'm reacting to a epic history video that I've been meaning to get round to, but I've been caught up on other stuff that I nearly forgot about it. And it's Nelson's battles in 3D, Copenhagen. So this is before Trafalgar, because according to the thumbnail, the date says 1801. But now that I've got some stuff out of the way, I'm round to it. So, like I said, I want to carry on with this series if there's any more episodes. But this looks like this might be the last one. And if you haven't seen my reaction to the other episodes in this Nelson Battles in 3D series, I recommend you check those out before checking this one out. And also, the usual disclaimer when I react to any historical videos: if I don't show so much to what is considered a proper reaction, it is probably obvious I don't know much about the subject at hand, and if I do know anything, I'll most likely pause the video to give my input or ask any curious questions, which hopefully will be answered in the comments. With that being said, the link to the original video will be in the description down below. Please go and check out Epic History and hopefully support and subscribe to their channel. And yeah, that's all I can say without waffling. So let's see. So get full screen up there, and captions on for historical videos, and let's get into this.
In 1792, the French Revolution sparked a European conflict that would last a generation. A struggle for mastery of Europe and the world. A contest fought on land and sea.
I should have said at the beginning, this is another one of the few naval battles involving the Royal Navy that I don't know about. So, and there's a fair few of them. So, especially not against the Danish fleet at Copenhagen, which I assume is that we're going against the Royal Navy. Yeah, the Royal Navy is going against the Danish fleet. So,
in this war of shifting alliances, the most enduring rivalry was between France and Britain. Britain could not challenge France on land, but at sea, it was a different matter.
The whale and the elephant.
Britain's Royal Navy was as dominant on the waves as Napoleon was to prove on land. And in an age when Britain had many skilled naval commanders, one stood out above the rest. Horatio Nelson. Bold, inspiring and brilliant. For the British, he'd become a national hero and legend. These are the stories of his greatest battles.
Ships of war are the biggest and best negotiators in Europe. Wow.
March 1801. A British battle fleet sails across the North Sea. More than 50 vessels in all, commanded by Admiral Sir Hyde Parker. His second in command, Vice Admiral Lord Nelson. Their destination, the Danish Straits. Their target, Copenhagen. 9 months have passed since Napoleon's victory at Marengo shattered the Second Coalition. In its wake, Austria makes peace with France. Paul, Emperor of Russia, has also withdrawn from the coalition and is now considering switching sides and making an alliance with France. The cause? His fury at Britain's recent actions. Britain, which, having captured Malta from the French, refuses to hand it back to its original owners, the Knights of St. John, of which Paul is Grand Master. Britain, which believes its naval blockade against France entitles it to stop, search and detain neutral ships at will. The insults and grievances have grown over many years. And in 1800, the neutral nations decide to act. Under Paul's leadership, Russia, Prussia, Sweden, and Denmark put aside their differences to form a League of Armed Neutrality to uphold their rights at sea. For Britain, the League presents a dangerous threat. If they cannot search neutral ships, they believe their blockade of France will be fatally undermined by smuggling. A hostile Baltic threatens the source of their essential naval supplies, such as timber. Worse yet, if Russia, Denmark, and Sweden decide to take on Britain directly, their combined fleets will pose a formidable challenge. Britain decides it must strike first to break up the League, and it will target its weakest and most exposed member first: Denmark. Admiral Sir Hyde Parker has been dispatched to Copenhagen with a powerful fleet and an ultimatum for the Danes: quit the League and grant the British safe passage through the Straits, or be attacked. The League of Armed Neutrality was meant to guarantee Danish security. Instead, it has put her in the firing line of the world's most powerful navy.
Our friend here is a little nervous about dark nights and fields of ice. We must brace up, and these are not times for nervous systems. Nelson's letter to Lord St. Vincent.
Admiral Sir Hyde Parker has received his command on the basis of seniority and because he has experience of planning operations in the Baltic, though he has never actually been there.
Wow.
He is well liked, but will soon exhibit a frustrating pattern of indecision and delay, to the exasperation of his second-in-command, Lord Nelson. The hero of Cape St. Vincent, the victor of the Nile, Nelson's adored by the public and admired by comrades as a daring commander. He has the scars to prove it, having lost an arm and now blind in one eye.
Wow.
The British fleet consists of 19 ships of the line, 5 frigates, and many smaller ships for navigating the shallow waters of the Danish Straits. These include sloops, brigs, and bomb ships, armed with mortars for high-angle fire. They also carry 900 Marines for attacking shore defenses. Another ship of the line, HMS Invincible, is en route to join Parker's task force when she is shipwrecked off the Norfolk coast with the loss of 400 lives. After a week of sailing, the British fleet enters the Kattegat Strait.
Bear in mind, the North Sea has been labelled by so many people as the most dangerous sea in the entire world.
And dispatches the frigate Blanche with the ultimatum for Denmark. 3 days later, Blanche returns. The Danes have rejected the British terms. The ultimatum puts the Danes on high alert. But with the Russian fleet still iced into its Baltic ports, and the Swedes still preparing for action, now is the moment to strike against an isolated enemy. Not a moment should be lost in attacking the enemy, Nelson writes to Parker. They will every hour and day be stronger. We shall never be as good a match for them as at this moment. Instead, winds and Parker's indecision combine to delay the fleet's advance for several days. The British do not arrive off Copenhagen until the 30th of March. The Danish fleet is outclassed and outnumbered. It would be madness for it to come out and fight. So to reach it, the British must sail into Copenhagen harbour. That night, Admiral Parker and Nelson approach by boat for a closer look. Had the British sailed without delay, they would have found the Danish defences half complete and undermanned. But on the eve of battle, they appear stronger than expected. The approach to Copenhagen's harbour is dominated by a narrow, deep-water channel known as King's Deep. Along its edge, the Danes have anchored 18 warships in line. Many are dismasted hulks, not fit for sea, but they can still act as powerful floating gun platforms. They are supported by several smaller ships and shore batteries, many manned by inexperienced but patriotic volunteers. Guard ships protect the harbour's northern entrance, as well as the dangerous Trikroner fort, housing 65 heavy guns and 3 mortars. Potentially just as dangerous as the Danish defences, the shoals, which must be carefully navigated to bring the British safely into King's Deep. Copenhagen will be a tough nut to crack. But for all his faults, Admiral Parker knows Nelson's qualities and hands him complete responsibility for planning and leading the attack.
It looks formidable to those who are children at war, but to my judgment, with 10 sail in line, I can annihilate them. Oh, that's loud.
For his attack, Nelson asks Parker for just 10 ships of the line. Parker gives him 12. While Parker and the heaviest ships stand off to the northeast, Nelson will lead his ships, supported by Captain Riou's frigate squadron and the smaller vessels, in an attack from the south. On the 1st of April, Nelson sails down the outer channel in full view of the Danes and drops anchor to await a favourable southerly wind for the attack. That evening, Nelson invites all his captains to dine aboard HMS Elephant, where together they toast a leading wind and victory. He then spends the night writing out precise instructions for every captain, specifying their targets, while Captain Hardy goes out by boat to take soundings of the depth of the channel under the very noses of the enemy. The entire Danish fleet would be a close match for Nelson's force in terms of firepower. But many Danish crews have been hastily thrown together, a mix of soldiers, sailors and civilians, many with little training or experience. While Nelson's plan means his firepower will be focused on just a section of the Danish line, defending King's Deep. Next morning, Nelson gets his wind, and at 9:30 a.m. the British fleet is underway, with HMS Edgar in the lead. But disaster strikes immediately. Nelson's old ship, HMS Agamemnon, cannot clear the middle ground shoal and runs aground. It's an ominous start for such a hazardous operation. Half an hour later, Edgar comes within range of Provistine at the southern end of the Danish line. And she opens fire. One by one, Danish and British ships join the action. The lead British ships follow Nelson's orders to the letter. As each ship reaches its allotted position, it drops anchor and begins to blast its targets at close range. The ships behind pass on the outer side to reach their own stations. Glaton lines up against the Danish flagship Danabro. Ardent against Kronborg. Edgar takes on Ulan and the floating batteries Nubor and Ransborg. Isis against Vagri. But from his flagship, Nelson sees Bellona stray too close to the middle ground shoal. His desperate signals cannot stop her going aground. Nelson makes sure to avoid Bellona's error, then anchors HMS Elephant in Bellona's intended position. From here, Elephant takes on the floating battery Grenier and the converted horse transport Agershus. To emphasize the dangers of the shoal, Nelson raises signal 16. Engage the enemy more closely. With 2 ships grounded, Nelson has to improvise and shouts orders to each passing ship, redirecting them to new targets. Soon, Ganges is taking on Elephant's intended target, Shalan. Monarch engages Charlotta Amelia and the floating battery Soesten. Defiance takes on Holstein. But HMS Russell becomes disoriented in the thick smoke and grounds alongside Bellona. The battle has just started, and already 3 of Nelson's most powerful ships are immobilized. Captain Ryu's frigate squadron, however, is about to step into the breach. The 36-gun HMS Desiree takes up her position to rake the southernmost Danish ships, while Captain Ryu himself, aboard HMS Amazon, leads the rest of the frigate squadron towards the head of the British line to take on unengaged Danish defences and Trekroner Fort. By 11 AM, all the British ships of the line are engaged, and an immense artillery duel begins. Despite the loss of 3 ships, Nelson's hurried improvisation means he has still been able to concentrate his force against the southern half of the Danish line. British gunnery gives them the upper hand, but the Danes are putting up a fierce resistance. Many of the crews that man the anchored Danish warships and hulks are inexperienced. Some have arrived only hours before the fighting began. But their bravery in the heat of battle is remarked upon by all, including their enemy. At the head of the British line, HMS Monarch and Defiance are in the most exposed position, taking on multiple enemies and within range of Trekroner Fort. Monarch has already lost her captain, James Moss, killed by a cannonball. His ship will suffer around 40% casualties, with 56 dead and 164 wounded. But the well-drilled British gun crews are also wreaking havoc. At 11:15, the floating battery Ransborg has to abandon her position in the line and drifts into the shoals. The Danish flagship Danabro has taken heavy damage from Elephant and Glaton. With fires breaking out, the Danish commander, Commodore Fisher, transfers his command to another ship. Under incessant fire, the center of the Danish line begins to give way. The battered frigate Elven drifts north to safety. Nubor tows Agershus out of the line of fire, and both are deliberately run aground before they sink. Nearly all of Shaylin's 74 guns are silent, and she is taking on water. She drifts north, but drops anchor in order not to obstruct Dracona Fort's guns. Then, she strikes her colors.
Other dead bodies on the deck were growing so fast that we could barely get to our guns.
Admiral Parker's heavy ships are still 2 or 3 miles off, struggling to make progress against a headwind. The Commander-in-Chief cannot see much of the battle through the thick smoke, but he can see 2 grounded ships signaling for assistance. At 1:15 p.m, he raises signal 39, ordering his fleet to break off the action. When the signal is pointed out to Nelson, he turns to Captain Foley, commanding HMS Elephant. "You know, Foley, I have only one eye, and I have a right to be blind sometimes." Then, putting his telescope to his blind eye, quips, "I really do not see the signal." In fact, Parker's intention is to give Nelson the opportunity to withdraw with honor if he deems it necessary. Parker fully expects Nelson to ignore the order if there is any chance of victory. Nelson acknowledges Parker's signal, but does not repeat it to his ships. His fleet continues the battle. To the north, Captain Ryu also sees Parker's signal, but through the smoke, he cannot see that Nelson has not repeated it. His frigates are now in heavy action against Dracona Fort, which packs triple the broadside of each ship. Ryu reluctantly gives the order to withdraw. HMS Amazon is the last to leave, and as it turns, it is raked through the stern by the fort's guns. Amidst the carnage, Ryu shouts, "Come then, my boys, let us all die together." Seconds later, he is cut in half by a cannonball. Despite the loss of Captain Ryu, the British are clearly gaining the upper hand. But as British boats advance to take possession of surrendered enemy ships, Danish batteries continue to fire. It's a breach of the customs of naval warfare. Nelson is furious. He sends a threat to the Danes, carried by boat, under a white flag. Lord Nelson has directions to spare Denmark when no longer resisting. But if the firing is continued, Lord Nelson will be obliged to set on fire all the floating batteries he has taken, without having the power of saving the brave Danes who have defended them. The letter is taken straight to Crown Prince Frederick of Denmark, watching the battle from Copenhagen's citadel. By the time it reaches him, many more Danish ships are out of action, as the British train their guns north. HMS Defiance now advances to take on Holstein, the new Danish flagship. She takes such a battering that Commodore Fisher is forced to move his flag once more, this time to Dracona Fort. Holstein surrenders, followed by Soeston. Inford Stretton's capitulation at 3 p.m. confirms the defeat of the northern part of the Danish line. To the south, Dannebrog, Jylland, Kronborg and Sverfisken have also struck their colours. Hayen follows shortly after. With Dannebrog's fires out of control, British boats are sent to help remove the crew. After 4 hours of fierce fighting, Danish resistance is finally coming to an end.
English have never had such a warm day as this, neither against the Dutch, the French, or the Spanish. Wow.
Shortly after 3 p.m, Crown Prince Frederick of Denmark accepts Nelson's offer of a
Is he a
ceasefire.
Habsburg by any chance?
Nelson begins to withdraw his battered fleet, past the unconquered Trikroner fort. But the damaged British ships struggle to maneuver in the narrow channel. Ganges and Monarch collide and run aground. Nelson's own ship, Elephant, and Defiance also get stuck on shoals and cannot be refloated for several hours. These mishaps indicate how easily Nelson's attack might have gone badly wrong, with less preparation or skill. At 4:30 p.m, as the British are leaving, the fires reach the magazine of Dannebrog. More than 200 perish in the explosion. An eerie silence descends over the waters of King's Deep, where the British bomb ships remain at anchor. Their mortars are a menacing presence, intended to influence the negotiations that lie ahead. An exhausted Nelson returns to his own ship, HMS St. George. As he takes his leave of Captain Foley, he tells him, "Well, I have fought contrary to orders, and I shall perhaps be hanged. Never mind, let them." But as the scale of Nelson's victory emerges, there is no chance of that. Of the 18 Danish vessels in their front line, 12 have been captured. Of these, Holstein is kept, becoming HMS Nassau.
Okay.
The rest are burned. The Danes also suffer grievous losses among their sailors, soldiers, and volunteers. British losses are 254 killed and 667 wounded. 2 ships, Monarch and Isis, have to be sent home for repairs. But the rest of the fleet is soon battle-worthy once more. The British have won the battle, but now need to secure a political victory. The ceasefire is extended as negotiations get underway. In Copenhagen, Nelson is received with a mix of admiration, curiosity, and displeasure, but helps to win over his hosts by telling them the Danes fought bravely for 4 hours, where the French would not have lasted 1.
Wow.
6 days after the battle, news arrives that changes everything. Paul, Emperor of Russia, is dead, murdered in his palace by army officers. With the League of Armed Neutrality's chief architect out of the picture, the Danes can negotiate with the British without fear of Russian reprisal. They quickly suspend their commitment to the League and agree a 14-week armistice with Britain. British ships can now resupply at Copenhagen and sail on to their remaining objectives in the Baltic. But the British fleet will see no further action in the Baltic that year. The death of Paul, diplomacy, and the British show of force mean the League of Armed Neutrality quickly unravels. The fleet does get a new commander, though. Parker is recalled to England. His successor is Vice Admiral Nelson. Nelson's victory at Copenhagen wins him fresh titles: Viscount and Baron Nelson of the Nile and of Burnham Thorpe, Baron Nelson of the Nile and of Hilborough. In July, he arrives back in England to be reunited with Lady Hamilton. That autumn, a preliminary peace agreement is signed with France. But in these turbulent times, peace is fleeting. Less than 2 years later, Nelson is back at sea, sailing for his date with destiny, off Cape Trafalgar. Do you want to be first to watch Epic History's biggest series ever?
The rest is just that. So this has been another interesting video, and not much more I can say, but it was again another well put together video by Epic History, and I think it was Drachnafel they teamed up with this, so please check them both out as well. So if you like this reaction, please like, comment and subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you in the next